Hello everyone, this is Mr. Big T Anderson, and this time we are doing Pirates of the Caribbean 5.5, The Tale of Hector Barbossa, by PotCFan101. Now, this is obviously from the Pirates of the Caribbean fandom. If you're new to these sorts of things, let me give you the rules. PotC fan wrote it, I'm just the one reading it. If you want to give the author due credit, links down below. You can do so either through the author's page or through the story page itself. I'm just really schmucky duck here reading it, so yeah, that's pretty much it. And if you like how I did it, just put a comment down below. Tell me what you think. Okay? Anyway, let's get to it. Pirates of the Caribbean 5.5. Note, takes place after Dead Men Tell No Tales. Ending of movie included. Changed slightly. Spoilers. As the sea closed its gap, there was a calm on the water. Jack Sparrow, Corinna Smith, and Henry Turner had escaped Salazar and made it onto the Black Pearl, but in doing so, Hector Barbossa, Jack's former nemesis, sacrificed himself to ensure their safety, upon discovering that Corinna was in fact his daughter. As the sea went quiet, Jack watched the depths of the ocean, taking off his hat and placing it over his heart. "Pirate's life, Hector," Jack said, mourning the loss of his former enemy turned friend. The crew of the Black Pearl soon followed suit, mourning their fallen ally. Seeing Corinna, Henry tries to comfort her over her father's death. "Are you all right?" "For a moment I had everything," she says quietly, remembering her father's last words to her. "What am I to you?" Corinna asks after seeing a tattoo of the Trident's constellation on Barbossa's forearm. Barbossa simply smiled and replied, "Treasure," before grabbing Jack's sword and killing Salazar, falling to his death in the process, only to have it all lost again. Henry comforts her by handing her back her diary and holding her close. "Not everything, Miss Smith," he says. Through tears, Corinna smiles. "Barbossa," she replied while hugging Henry. "My name is Barbossa." As Jack was about to let them be, Henry called out, "Jack, thank you for your help. I would like you to be with me when my father returns. I think he'd be happy to see you." "I'd like you to stay too. I want to know more about my father," Corinna interjected. After thinking it over, Jack finally made up his mind. "All right, I'll stay to see your eunuch father and tell you of Hector's history with us. But as a warning, it's not all pretty. Savvy?" The next day, Jack, Henry, and Corinna are patiently awaiting for his father's return. Having broken his curse, Will Turner was no longer bound to the Flying Dutchman. All this time, Corinna had heard stories of the ship and how the captain was to ferry the souls of the dead into the afterlife. As Will finally arrived on land, Henry went to greet him, finally reuniting with his family. Just as Corinna was joining the two, Will noticed someone coming out of the house. It was his wife, Elizabeth, former daughter of Weatherby Swan. Reunited, Jack, Will, Elizabeth, Henry, and Corinna made their way inside, ready to tell their tale of how they broke the Dutchman's curse. "So the Trident of Poseidon was real after all?" Will asked, visibly surprised. "Come on, Will. With us facing fishmen, and you manning the Flying Dutchman, did you really think the Trident was simply a myth?" Jack sincerely asked. "No, I suppose not. I just didn't know anyone who actually found it," Will replied. "Aye. But that was what everyone said about Isla de Merta," Jack countered. "Isla de Merta?" Corinna asked, who never heard of the island. "That'll play a part in your father's story, Corinna," as Elizabeth quickly said. "Right then, first, I'd like to hear just how you got the Trident, because Barbossa's full history is a long story," Will said. "All right, Father. For me, all this started when I was part of the British Royal Navy, and we were chasing a pirate ship into the Devil's Triangle. I tried to stop my commanding officer, but he tossed me in the brig, declaring my defiance as treason. Soon after entering, a ghost crew led by Captain Salazar murdered all the British on the ship, leaving me to send a message to Jack that he's coming for him. He must have escaped the Triangle soon after." "And how come he was after you in the first place, Jack?" Will asked, eyeing the pirate. "I might have caused his death in the Triangle when I was just a kid." How did Salazar escape? Elizabeth asked skeptically. I accidentally traded me compass for a bottle of rum and forgot that if I betrayed the compass like that, me worst fear would be unleashed, Jack said, looking down to avoid everyone's glares. Karina thought back to when she said, "Are all pirates this stupid?" Now she thinks, maybe more than I thought. That reminds me, got any rum? Will got up, grabbed a bottle from the cellar before making it back, handing it off to Jack. Ah, thanks, mate. Always liked you for taking after Bootstrap. Anyways, when I first found Jack, I didn't believe he was the man my parents talked about because you made him sound like a legend. In the cell, he was just an old drunk with no pants, Henry said, causing Will and Elizabeth to chuckle. Funny, just prior to our excursions, Jack was trying to rob the new bank, Karina added, remembering her first encounter with Sparrow. All right, after escaping our scheduled deaths, we set sail to find the Trident, Jack said, changing the subject. Unfortunately, Salazar had caught up to us, and we abandoned ship to a near island, where we learned that the Spanish were unable to step on land, except I knew that one already, getting an eye roll from both Will and Elizabeth. That's weird. I wasn't able to go on land for 10 years as captain of the Dutchman, Will interjected, remembering his one day with Elizabeth. After arriving on land, I finally realized that the crew chasing us were actually ghosts, Karina said. Up until then, I knew nothing of the supernatural. I thought that ghosts, krakens, and mermaids were all myths. I was a woman of science and believed that there was an explanation for everything. Well, I've already told you those exist, and the krakens don't speak, Henry reminded her. We vouch for that. The former Squidface sent his pet kraken after me because I owed him my soul after captaining the Pearl for a few years. And then later, dear Mommy chained me up and served me up to the beastie on a silver platter, earning a glare from Elizabeth. Will you ever forgive me for that, Jack? We rescued you from the locker. Oh, and mermaids exist as well. In fact, I encountered a few around the same time Blackbeard stuck the pearl in a bottle, Jack quickly said, changing the subject. After that realization, I ran through the jungle on the island, eventually getting caught in a trap. Jack and Henry followed me and were soon trapped as well. The men who trapped us apparently also wanted Jack to pay a debt and tried to force Jack to marry one of their sisters. That's when my father showed up and rescued us. Aye, and apparently he almost made a deal with Salazar to serve us up to him. Luckily, Hector had a change of heart, and using his sword of Triton, he freed the pearl from its bottle prison, free to sail once more. It was then that we started searching for the island no map can find, Henry interrupted. Barbossa had tied up Jack at the back of the ship, but let Karina and I go because he needed her to locate the island. Yes, that was when he confronted me about my diary, claiming that my father was a thief, if only I knew that then he was my father, Karina said, looking at the floor. Don't think like that. Hector didn't even know until you told him your name. Then why didn't he say anything? Why didn't either of you? Because, your daddy threatened to cut me tongue out if I ran my mouth, Jack said dramatically. And secondly, he thought you wouldn't believe either of us, since you believed your father was a man of science. But then why did he leave me at the orphanage? Because he knew that wasn't the life for you, Karina. After your mother, Margaret, died, she was a nice woman, by the way. Your father was not able to give you a decent life like she could. Karina then felt a new wave of loss, knowing that her father truly loved her. Right after my discussion with Hector, Salazar cut up to us, and your boy Henry was nice enough to cut me loose, Jack continued, smiling at Henry. As Hector, Henry, and the crew fought Salazar's men, we instructed Karina to keep sailing towards the island no matter what, or we'd all be dead. Soon after, we reached the island, and Salazar had to retreat, or he'd be forced on land, Karina added. But not before taking Henry while leaving. Meanwhile, Jack, my father, and I found 5 red rubies in the center. And by placing the missing piece from my diary, we were able to divide the sea in 2 to find Poseidon's tomb. Right when they started searching for the Trident, Salazar and his crew discussed what to do with me. Realizing that Jack was getting closer to the Trident, he decided to possess my body in order to step on land. Henry said, earning a look of shock from his parents. Aye, when he caught up to us and attacked me, I didn't know at first it was Salazar, and almost killed him. That was until I found out that it was Salazar, and if I hurt him, I also hurt Henry. While Jack and Henry fought, I tried to take the trident, and then Salazar took it from me. Being able to walk on land, after releasing Henry, Salazar controlled the trident and started to throw Jack around like a rag doll, and that's when we realized that destroying the trident will break all the curses. Which is how my curse has been broken. Aye, it has, Jack replied. For Salazar, he and his men felt the curse break immediately, becoming human once more. Suddenly the sea started to become whole again. So Barbossa let down the pearl's anchor, so we could climb up. Unfortunately, Salazar was able to grab hold as well. Just as Salazar was behind me, I slipped and my father stopped me from falling, Karina told Will and Elizabeth. As he pulled me up, I saw the tattoo of the trident on his arm. After asking who I was to him, he simply replied, treasure, before sacrificing himself to ensure our safety on the pearl. Feeling saddened, Will and Elizabeth looked at each other, remembering the times before Barbossa helped them rescue Jack from the locker, and when he was cursed by the Aztec gold. They had no idea he could be this caring, let alone have a daughter. Karina, Will started, we're going to tell you our history with Barbossa, from beginning to end. And no matter what you hear, whether it's good or bad, just remember, he died a hero, saving you. Oh, I might be able to extend the history a bit, William. Hector and I ran into each other while searching for the Fountain of Youth. Our story starts with Will and I being children and how we first met. I was sailing with my father, the former Governor Swan, to Port Royal. Suddenly I saw a shipwreck with a boy floating amongst the wreckage. Will. That's right. We didn't know it at first, but my ship was attacked by the Black Pearl because I had with me a piece of cursed Aztec gold, Will said. Elizabeth found it, and fearing that the British Navy would arrest me for being a pirate, took the medallion and hid it. That must have been when she saw the pearl for the first time. Wait, if the gold was cursed and both of you took it, how come you weren't cursed? Karina asked. Because the curse worked if the gold was lifted directly from the chest. Only my father did that, but gave the medallion to me, Will explained. We didn't see anything out of the ordinary for the next 8 years, but then Jack Sparrow arrived in Port Royal, Elizabeth continued. Aye, and my first introduction to Elizabeth was seeing her fall off a cliff and I had to save her. Shortly after, I had a rough introduction to your father here. I was locked up as the Black Pearl attacked Port Royal, Jack said. It was only after that Will broke me out of the cell saying that Barbossa had taken Elizabeth. Yes, and this was when I first met Barbossa, Elizabeth interrupted. He seemed like a kind man at first, but he quickly became a cruel person while cursed. So, my father was not always a kind person? Karina asked, confused. I'm sorry, but no. I'd like to say he became a better person after he was resurrected, but back to the curse. Your father first told me the legend of the Aztec gold. At first, like you, I didn't believe in ghost stories. Till I ran outside of his cabin one night and discovered the entire crew were skeletons in the moonlight. They couldn't die. By the time we caught up with Barbossa and Elizabeth, they had already performed the ritual to end the curse, but it didn't work. Will continued. That was because they needed my blood, not Elizabeth's. While Barbossa and his crew argued about killing her, I knocked Jack out and took Elizabeth to safety. And then when I woke up, Barbossa nearly killed me, but I struck a deal with him to grab the medallion. Jack interrupted. Unfortunately, Barbossa double-crossed me and sent me to a remote island called Rum Runner's Isle. Again. I'm sorry, but what do you mean by again? Karina asked. Jack looked nervously and then decided to say, Karina, your father and I have a long history. He used to be a first mate on me Black Pearl, but when we were planning on sailing to Isla de Muerta, Barbossa led a mutiny, sending me to Rum Runners. He left me with one pistol and one shot. Luckily, after 3 days, I had escaped. How exactly did you escape? Henry asked, intrigued. Jack grinned and replied, Sea turtles, mate. Elizabeth then replied, That is not true. While on the island, you told me you spent 3 days drinking rum before being picked up by a trade ship. Alright, fine then. Anyway, all that happened 10 years before I set foot on Port Royal. When Elizabeth and I were on the island, she was able to send up a signal to alert the British Navy to where they were convinced to sail to Isla de Merta and rescue Will. Jack arrived just in time as Barbossa was about to slit my throat, Will continued. But Jack had a plan, stealing an Aztec coin, becoming cursed himself, and freeing me. Soon after, Elizabeth joined us in fighting Barbossa and his crew, who stayed behind while the rest of the crew fought the Navy. Just as Barbossa was about to shoot me, we all heard a gunshot ring out. We all turned to see that it was Jack's pistol that had fired. At first, Barbossa thought the shot was wasted, until he noticed that Will had broken the curse, which caused Barbossa to finally die. Seeing Karina beginning to look towards the floor again, Jack tells her, "Karina, your father did do some horrible things, but he also did good. Don't remember him by all the bad deeds. Remember him for the great man he became." "So he really did die once," Karina said. "If you weren't in the Devil's Triangle, how did he come back?" "We never actually saw this, but the mystic Tayadalma resurrected him in order to rescue Jack," Will explained. "At the time, the Kraken had killed Jack for Davy Jones, and we all planned on bringing him back, so Tia brought in Barbossa, because he knew how to get to Davy Jones' locker." "Oh," Karina said, deep in thought. "Is there any way to bring him back?" "Well, you could sail to the world's end and make it so your ship becomes up as down, but I wouldn't recommend it. We lost too much when I was brought back." "Before we brought Jack back, Barbossa instructed us all to travel with him to Singapore, where we tried to barter with the pirate Lord Sao Fang for charts to the world's end. After a brief battle with the East India Trading Company, Fang gave us the maps and we sailed to World's End, eventually finding Jack. As usual, Barbossa wanted to captain the Pearl, and after arguing, we both decided to be co-captains and sail for Shipwreck Cove, where the Brethren Court were gathered to deal with the East India Trading Company and Davy Jones. There, we took a vote, and Elizabeth became the Pirate King, and she decided we'd go to war against the EITC. After declaring war, Jack found himself on the Dutchman, and it was revealed that the reason Teodalma resurrected Barbossa in the first place was so he could free her from her human bonds and return as Calypso. Soon afterwards, Calypso caused a maelstrom where the Pearl and the Dutchman battled each other. During that time, Elizabeth and I got married. "What? You two got married during a war?" Henry asked, shocked. "Yes, and Karina's father was the one who married us," Elizabeth informed. "It took a little bit of time to fight off the EITC, Jones's crew, and recite our vows, but we eventually kissed and became husband and wife. Right after we married, Elizabeth and I went aboard the Dutchman to assist Jack, but Jones killed me. Wasting no time, Jack used my arm to stab Jones's heart, and that's how I became captain of the Flying Dutchman. With Jones defeated and the East India Trading Company destroyed, the Pearl and I stopped by Tortuga, where I discovered Barbossa left me without my ship. Again," Jack groaned while getting an eye roll from Will and Elizabeth. "However, I had figured out that Hector was after the Fountain of Youth, so I cut out the map from Sao Fang's charts, so Barbossa couldn't get to him, and I started my journey to the fountain. That is where our tale ends, but I did come on land for one day, 10 years later. The rest of the story is how Jack saw it." "Right then," Jack said, taking another swig of rum. 14 years after Jones was defeated, I was able to really start searching for the fountain. 14 years after the war on piracy, I had started to crack down on searching for the fountain. While trying to rescue my first mate Gibbs, I was captured and brought to the king in London. I discovered that Hector had become a privateer for the Royal Navy. It was then he revealed to me that he lost the Black Pearl, and in the process, he lost his right leg." "So that's how he got the peg," Karina whispered. "Aye. I quickly escaped, but learned later that Barbossa had forced Gibbs to help him find the fountain, or else he'd hang. The next time I met with Barbossa, it was after I had been captured by Blackbeard in order to find the silver chalices of Ponce de Leon, where he was waiting on the Santiago ship. We began to fight, but soon discovered that the Spanish had stolen the chalices, so we had to team up to get them back. Along the way, I discovered that he had practiced in dipping his swords in toad's poisons to give him a deadly advantage. While trying to steal his cups, the Spanish captured us, and we had a nice conversation while drinking rum out of Hector's peg leg. I quickly deduced that Hector was waiting for Blackbeard and wanted revenge, so Barbossa revealed that Blackbeard was the reason why he lost his leg, as well as putting the black pearl in a bottle. Seeing that we had a common enemy, I decided to have us escape a predicament, and we grabbed the chalices and left. I returned to Blackbeard and we continued our journey to the Fountain of Youth. Once there, Barbossa followed us, and the British and Blackbeard's men battled each other, while I fought Blackbeard's daughter, Angelica, and Scrum for the chalices. Eventually, the Spanish caught up with us and destroyed the fountain. As Blackbeard was distracted, Barbossa stabbed him through the heart with his poison blade, but Angelica also accidentally got cut. Seeing his revenge was complete, Barbossa took Blackbeard's sword to Triton, his crew, and his ship, the Queensland's Revenge. He started to make his own fleet of ships. With both Blackbeard and Angelica dying, I gathered the last waters of the fountain and tricked Blackbeard into saving his daughter's life before returning to Gibbs, who had stolen the Black Pearl from the Revenge.
So what was my father doing all that time? What were you doing? Karina asked, confused.
It's like I said, he had amassed a fleet. I was stuck in the town you were in. My last attempt there was robbing the bank where I met you.
Ah, yes, I remember. You ended up pulling the entire building out.
I have to ask, though, whatever happened to Angelica? Henry asked. Oh, I dropped her off at the same runner's aisle that Elizabeth and I were stuck on, Jack said slyly. I'm honestly not sure what happened to her after that. She either took my advice and boarded a passing ship, or she eventually died of starvation. Which brings us to where we were. My father found us at the island where the ghost could not step on land. He saved us from Salazar. Aye, Karina. He died protecting his daughter. He was a hero.
Is there a way to bring my father back? Karina asked Will.
Will looked nervously at Elizabeth, then at Jack.
I'm sorry, Karina, but with the curses broken, we can't be sure if Davy Jones' locker even exists anymore. He might be permanently stuck in the afterlife. But what about that mystic, Teodalma? Can she come back to resurrect him? Karina pressed.
I don't think she would if she does come back. She was Calypso in human form, and she only needed Barbossa to be released from her human bonds.
Oh.
Karina said, suddenly accepting that Barbossa was gone for good. Now, this is where the tale finally ends. Come on, we'll show you something Hector would probably want you to have. Jack, Karina, and the Turners left the house and started walking toward the Pearl. Jack, you sure took your time. Miss Barbossa, Turners, nice to see you all. Nice to see you too, mate. Did you fetch what I asked before I left? Aye, and I had scrum sail for it. Take a look over the side. Your ship awaits. Confused, Karina went to the other side of the ship and stared at the ocean. There, just a few feet away, was the Queen Anne's Revenge. I believe Hector would have wanted you to take his place as captain. I think these are your effects as well. Karina stared at him before noticing that he was handing her the sword of Triton, as well as Barbossa's old hat with the feathers. Taking them carefully, Karina was given a belt to sheath the sword and put the hat on, before going into a longboat to the Revenge.
Father, I'm happy to see you again, but I would like to go with Karina, Henry told Will.
It's okay, son. We'll see each other again, perhaps on the seas. Will told him, smiling. Karina and Henry made it to the Revenge, where Scrum, Murtaugh, and Mulroy were waiting. The fleet is awaiting your orders. What's our heading, Captain? Scrum asked her once they made it.
All hands on deck, you bloomin' cockroaches! Make way toward Tortuga! It's time to expand our crew!
Karina yelled at the top of her lungs as Jack the monkey climbed onto her shoulder, earning praise. And with that, the Queen's End's Revenge set sail with a new captain and new crew manning the ship. There goes a fine young lad, watching from a spyglass. I'll keep an eye on him. In the meantime, goodbye, Will. Goodbye, Elizabeth. I'll see you someday. Farewell, Jack.
Farewell, Jack.
What be our heading, Captain? Gibbs asked once they left. Follow the stars, mate. For once, there's a destination beyond the horizon, Jack replied, setting sail once more, and starting to sing an old shanty. Yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. And that was it. one thing I liked is Barbossa was one of my favorite characters. So obviously, I feel like I can do a fairly good Barbossa. I cannot do Captain Jack. I know. I'm sorry. I apologize. I can't do Captain Jack Sparrow. I just don't have the cadence for it quite down. And I actually had to listen to a lot of it just to see if I could. But Johnny Depp has a very weird way of speaking. Anyway, that was from PotCFan101. So if you like it, links down below. Give a good review. If you don't, then they don't know what they're doing right. And by them, I mean the author. And if you enjoyed how I did it, you can leave your comments here. Anyway, thank you for watching, or listening, I should say. Have a good day. Ta-ta.